So here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So as you can see on the screen here, basically you have to put your name, so your first name, last name, and you have to put your social. And so as we go through line A's, here basically you have to check the box here. So it says you can claim a credit for child and dependent care expenses if your filing status is married filing separately, unless you meet the requirements listed in the instructions on the married person filing separately. So if you meet this requirements, check this box. So in our case, yes, we actually meet this requirements. So that's for line A. For line B, if you or your spouse was a student or disabled during 2023 and you are entering deemed the income of $250 or $500 a month on Form 2441, based on the income rules listed in the instructions, check this box. Now, this does not apply to us, so we did not check this box. Okay, now, so let's go to part one. So part one basically relates to persons or organizations who provided the care, because remember, Form 2441 is all about child and dependent care expenses. So you got to list the people or the organizations that actually provided the care. So in column one, you can see here that we put the child care's the provider's name. So you have to put it can be a company or it can be a person. So the first line we put a hypothetical agency. So, and then you have to put the identifier number. So in this case, because it is a company, it is an organization, you have to put an EIN. And so you have to answer the question in column D. So was the care provider your household employee in 2023? No. So you have to put, and it's no for everything. And so you have to put on the same line here, the amount that you paid to that organization. So in this case, $5,000. Now the second row here, you have a person. You don't have an organization. You have a person. You put that person's social, and you have to enter the same question in column D, and the amount paid. And you do the same thing for the third sort of provider. So long story short, pretty straightforward. You have to specify whether it was a person who provided the care or it was an organization, and put the required social security number or employer identification number. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Now I want to show you part two. So basically, part two is all about credit for child and dependent care expenses. And so on line 2 here, you have to put more data about your qualifying person. So it can be a son, it can be a daughter, it can be anybody that actually meets the requirements. You want to make sure that it's pretty clear as to how you actually want to categorize that person. So you can see that in section 2, you have to put so for each qualifying person, you put the first name, last name of that person, as well as the person's social security number. Please make sure the socials are actually accurate, because the IRS checks that. They actually use that data to cross-check whatever you're filing on your form 1040. Okay, so you put in column D, you have to put the qualified expenses. So those are the amounts that you actually provided for the child. And one thing I want to say here is that on line number 3, you put whatever actually is applicable. Line number 4, you have to put your earned income. This is important to really see whether you qualify or not for this credit. So line 5, if married filing jointly, you have to put your spouse's earned income. So in our case here, there's nothing else, so we put whatever was on line 4. And so on line 6, follow the instructions. You want to enter the smallest of line 3, 4, or 5. And in our case, it's 6,000. And you want to enter the amount from form 1040 SR or 1040 NR, line 11. And so in our case, it was $85,000. And moving to line 8, you basically follow the instructions. So in our case here, what's really applicable here is 0.20. And you can see the reason why it's 0.20 is because you have the amount that we have goes from 43,000 all the way to like more than 43,000. So the corresponding decimal amount here is a 0.20. And then you follow the instructions on line 8. You multiply line 6 by line 8, and then this gives you, if you multiply 6,000 times 0.20, you have 1,200. Okay, And so basically you follow the same instructions here all the way to the bottom. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 2441. I'm just walking you through that form right now. I want to talk to you about part 3 now, so we have a clear idea. So part 3 really is kind of a straightforward also, and basically you are going to enter the total amount of dependent care benefits that you received in 2023. Okay, so basically you have given, but you might be receiving some the dependent care benefits as well, and so you put that on line 12. So we have a 3,500 on line 12, and you also do the same. So line 13 doesn't apply to our situation. Line 14 also doesn't apply to our hypothetical situation here. And line 15, basically the math is pretty clear, 3,500. And line 16, actually, you have to put whatever is applicable to your situation. So we put 10 grand, and 17 and 18, you have to put your earned income again to sort of contextualize the expenses. Line 19, the same thing. Line 20, you have to follow the instructions also. So when you enter the smallest of line 17, 18, or 19, you have 3,500. And line 21, actually here, you have to put 5,000 because the IRS tells you so, right? You enter 2,500 if married, filed separately, and you were required to enter your spouse's earned income on line 19, which we were not. So we put 5,000. And on line 22, you have to actually specify whether this is from your sole proprietorship or partnership. In our case, no, not at all. So if you check no, then it has to be 0. But if you were sole proprietorship or partnerships, then the calculation would have been different. And so line 23, you actually get the math correctly, and you have 3,500. And line 24 does not apply to us. 25 neither, and 24 neither, and 25. This is where you actually follow the math, and so the 25 actually it really amounts to $3,500. And 26 taxable benefits. There's nothing here, so we put 0. Now, I want to show you on the screen is that basically line 27. So basically, you have to follow instructions. So if you have 2 or more qualifying persons, if you remember, we had more than 2 qualifying persons. We had 3, as a matter of fact. So you put 6,000, and so you add lines 24 and 25. So this actually comes to 3,500. And you want to subtract, if you follow the instructions here, this actually comes to 2,500. If you subtract 3,500 from 6,000, you have 2,500. And basically for line 30, the amount is 18,000. And this is basically because line 2 of page 1 of this form, and you want to enter the smaller 21 or 30. And in our case here is 2,500. I want to show you on the screen next. I want to show you credit limits worksheet 8. That was kind of part of the instructions as we were working through the form itself. So this is what it looks like, and you might have to actually fill out those forms actually to attach. You have to attach this to your form 2441, and you might have to have this also in terms of paper trail, in terms of evidence. And so this is what it is. I just wanted to show it to you, and I also wanted to show you here form 2023 form 1040. Why am I showing you this? Because there is data that you are going to actually put from 2441 all the way here, and vice versa. This is kind of important in terms of making sure that the amounts are actually accurate. One thing I also want to say here is that when you actually talk about your credits and like liabilities, payments, and credits, all that kind of stuff, you need to make sure that the data ties from one form to another. Everything I'm telling you here is needed if you are filing a manual 1040. But if you're doing everything electronically, what happens in the background is that the tax software that you're using, whether it is H&R Block or tax layer or TurboTax or whatever, the software is doing the math for you. It's doing things automatically. So the tax software will prepare Form 2441 will prepare your Form 1040 and other ancillary schedules automatically, so you don't have to check everything or double check everything or triple check everything for that matter. The software will do it for you automatically. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about the Form 2441. Let me give you the steps you need to follow here if you are thinking about filing tax form 2441. It's important to understand that you may qualify for the Child and Dependent Care Credit if you pay someone to care for your dependent children under the age of 13, your disabled spouse, or dependents of any age who are mentally or physically unable to care for themselves, okay? And to qualify for the credit, the expenses you pay have to be for care that enables you to work, seek work, or attend school full-time. So there has to be that sort of trifecta, okay? You are required to show earned income to be eligible for the credit. If you're married and file a joint return, both you and your spouse need to report earned income unless one of you is disabled. And payments made to your dependent who serves as the care provider does not qualify for the credit. This is kind of important because the IRS has been adamant in the last few years at making sure that they deny that part of the process. So payments to your adult children who are at least 19 years of age do qualify, provided that you do not claim them as a dependent. So this is totally possible for you to really do that. Now, one thing I want to say here is that it's important to really understand that when it comes to general credit requirements, the care provider expenses you incur must be for the benefit of dependent children under the age of 13. This is really important. Age of 13, that's like the critical sort of mark. It could be your disabled spouse, or it could be dependents of any age who are mentally or physically unable to care for themselves. And the reason why I want to repeat this is because you have to actually have the proper documentation. Not every expense will qualify for the credit. The IRS only permits expenses that were necessary for you to go to work, look for a job, or attend school full-time. And so when we talk about when we talk about Form 2441, remember that you can provide the care yourself, or you can hire someone to provide the care for you. So when we talk about Form 2441 care providers, you have to just make sure that you report the names of the individuals and organizations you make payments to during the year for care provider services. And so the IRS also requires their addresses, social security numbers, or employer identification numbers, and the amounts that you paid them. Very important. What I want to say here is that when we talk about 2441, it's all about tax planning. It's all about tax planning. It's all about tax reduction. It's all about making sure that you are reducing your tax liabilities, right? And so this form, you have to complete it to report child and dependent care expenses paid for the year. And this form must be filed if you're planning to claim a credit for child and dependent care expenses. And now, completing this form 2441 doesn't guarantee that you are eligible for the child and dependent care tax credit, because there are income limitations and qualifying person rules. And so the maximum credit is 35% of employment related expenses. And this tax credit is non-refundable. So it's not refundable. You're not going to get any cash from it. It will reduce your taxes, but yeah. So if a tax credit decreases the amount of taxes owed the IRS dollar for dollar. So for example, if a taxpayer owed, let's say you owed $3,000 in taxes and you received a $2,000 tax credit, the tax liability will be $1,000 for the tax year. Conversely, a tax deduction reduces the person's income, meaning there's a lower amount of taxable income for that year. So when the IRS applies the marginal tax rate based on the person's income tax bracket, a percentage of that income will be owed in taxes. If the tax credit is refundable, it means any credit that exceeds the taxes owed is paid to the taxpayer as a refund. So if the tax credit were, let's say, $4,000 and the person owed $3,000 in taxes, the IRS will pay a refund of $1,000 to the taxpayer. If the tax credit is non-refundable, which 2441 is, it means the person won't get a refund even if the tax credit exceeds the amount of taxes owed for that year. In other words, the best case scenario with the non-refundable credit is that it reduces the tax liability to zero. And so when we talk about child and dependent care credits, dependent tax credit, this credit is based on the taxpayer's income and a percentage of the total amount of work-related expenses required to care for a qualifying person and qualifying persons, and the taxpayer can claim the credit on work-related expenses up to $3,000 for one qualifying person and up to $6,000 for two or more qualifying persons. If you remember, when we started our calculations, we actually stopped at $6,000 because we had three children, and yeah. Now let's talk about actually documenting, or let's say substantiating your expenses. The IRS may ask for a verification of child care expenses, and not every taxpayer will be audited, but filers must be prepared to show proof of expenses and that underlying information. In other words, who care costs were paid to was reported correctly. And so what are qualified expenses for IRS Form 2441? Well, qualified expenses include amounts paid to amount pays for household services and or the use of a daycare center for the qualifying person while you are working or looking for work. And household services include a babysitter, housekeeper, or cleaning service if used to care for the dependent. And so it's one of those things where you can get Form 2441 from the IRS websites or by mail or through online tax apps. Okay, it's important to really understand that your child and dependent care providers will not send this form to you. You are responsible for completing it and filing it with your taxes. And so if you're filing your taxes, let's say electronically, you can file Form 2441 along with your Form 1040. Again, it's just better to use the right tax program so that you can do things automatically. You don't have to do things manually. One thing I also want to say here is that it's one of those things where if you have, quote unquote, a complicated tax situation, it's just better to hire a tax preparer to kind of help you out. You can have a CPA, you can hire an EA, or you can hire a tax attorney to kind of help you out. Especially when you have if you have a patchwork family, so to speak, and things are a little complicated, and you are sharing the cost of support with your ex-wife or your ex-husband or anybody in the family, whatever. Like if you don't have a straightforward sort of family situation, it's just better to hire a third party, like a professional, to help you help you understand all the subtleties of tax laws, especially when it comes to child care credit. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's do a quick recap here. So in today's conversation, I was just explaining to you, I was walking through Form 2441. So I gave you the overview, the steps, and then now finally the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.